Hello, I'm very pleased to join this inspiring cohort of researchers and professionals within the spatial data science domain. My name is Iacopo, and I have a professional and educational background that lies at the intersection of data science, urban planning, and social, economic, and environmental sustainability. I'm currently working as artificial intelligence scientist at RHEA Group and as advisor at Urban AI. The personal work I'm presenting today, called Urban Forestry Science, was nominated as winning proposal by the Bruno Kessler Foundation and Climate KIC. The work was also sponsored by European Space Agency high-resolution satellite data. The following presentation aims at briefly outlining the theoretical framework by which the work was inspired and show how urban planning practice can be greatly innovated by spatial data science techniques. Specifically, the case study that I will be presenting today concerns urban forestry planning scenarios. Then it will be displayed the scientific details of the work and finally the implementation aspects, tools and visualizations. The theoretical framework of the entire research is inspired by the general theory of urbanization published by the engineer Ildefonso Cerdà in 1867, which is considered the first text in history that presents urbanization comprehensively as a science. Cerdà planned his book in 4 volumes, but he only published the first and the second one, in which he expanded his work with a more scientific and structured approach, in order to comprehend how statistical information about the various layers of the city could provide an understanding of the challenges that cities were facing at that time. Particularly within his second volume, he describes his analytical methodology towards urban planning, thoroughly collecting data on fundamental elements of the city. In fact, spanning from demographic to streetscape, census, and dwelling information, he aimed at establishing true and solid facts, as you can see from the charts example on this slide. Furthermore, since the mid-20th century, ecology and urbanism have begun to converge as researchers began to study the impact of urban phenomena on the planet. And now that the effects of climate change are undeniable, the integration of these two sciences, urbanism and ecology, is accelerating. Cerdà intuitively included in his theory multiple references to the idea of the urban organism as an advance of our urban ecology, which studies the city as an ecosystem. Keeping this broader research context in mind, the proposal's objective was to unfold a strategy to identify optimal locations in the city of Madrid for future urban tree canopy using public available data. As everyone knows, trees represent a fundamental economic, social, environmental asset for our urban areas. The green canopy infrastructure provides multifaceted benefits for the planet and citizens, such as particulate matter removal, temperature reduction, noise pollution, flooding prevention, whether they are located in parks or along streets. That's the reason why the research correlates environmental data with the purpose of defining the environmental discomfort index. The statistical composite indicator provides insights regarding the environmental conditions of Madrid districts in 2019 being considered as a more robust for the methodological approach. As everyone knows, 2020 or 2021 might represent an outlier for the current condition that we are all living. The environmental discomfort index is formed by 6 elementary indicators selected via a subjective approach that relies on the domain expertise. On this slide, indeed, you can see all the information that was collapsed within our final index, namely carbon monoxide, noise pollution, particulate matter, precipitations, solar radiation, temperature, and trees density. Most information is tabular and structured data in the form of probabilistic samples as a primary source of Madrid municipality. All these features characterize the multidimensional index. For clarity, they are indeed organized as a matrix composed by all different urban zones as observations and as many columns as the number of elementary indicators. After having performed a multivariate analysis in the form of a correlation matrix, it was needed to reduce all elementary indicators to the same units. Therefore, it was applied MPI normalization. The transformation that happens only vertically, standardizing all indicators between 70 and 130. In this case, MPI was used in order to assign the same weight to the indicators. After normalizing all the elementary indicators, it was needed to aggregate them to finally compose our multidimensional index. Using MPI aggregation, we sum the mean of all horizontal elements and the variance sigma. Once aggregated, the multidimensional matrix collapses into one unique number for each urban zones that describe the environmental discomfort index accordingly. Finally, to verify the robustness of the composite index, it was needed to perform an influence analysis by fitting a regression line between our index and each elementary indicator that each time is removed. This analysis is helpful to observe the indicator's influence on the final outcome. This was also a final criteria to select normalization and aggregation methodologies, as MPI process resulted in the most robust index. The final results, displayed in the cartography here and publicly available on the link at the bottom right of this slide, demonstrate reddish areas with an index of maximum 115, representing very high environmental discomfort, respectively the urban zones of Sol and Cortés, followed by other central areas, while greener ones have values around 90, as it is clearly visible in peripheral zones. As you can see from the interactive visualization, for each district are also shown all elementary environmental indicators, like particulate matter, carbon dioxide, urban temperature, and others, that provide insights for decision-making purposes. In this specific project, for demonstration of the methodology capabilities, it was selected the Santa Eugenia district as it presented a notably high solar radiation indicator. After the first spatial analysis performed at urban scale, granular and detailed observations are conducted on the selected district in order to detect optimal tree canopy locations. This second interactive interface shows three different layers: solar radiations, trees presence, and potential optimal locations for future green canopy. In fact, as it can be observed in this first layer representing solar radiation, the darker the areas, the higher the temperature is. In the second are visualized the trees already present in the area with all details contained in the Madrid inventory database and potentially with other complementary information. And finally, it is shown the layer with potential areas for future tree canopy planning, considering locations where we have not presence of green areas, but we have a potential high urban temperature. I would like also to underline that in this case, the solar radiation layer was taken as an example, but the same protocol, it is applicable to all other indicators shown previously within the urban scale cartography. Finally, the proposal presents both some potentials and limitations that might be addressed with the assistance of artificial intelligence and specifically deep learning models. In fact, the methodology proposed has the potentials to be replicated throughout time. This approach would allow Madrid municipality to measure the environmental discomfort index and observe any changes in relation to policies adopted in the past, in the present, and forecast future impacts via deep learning models composed by convolutional and long short-term memory artificial neural networks. Moreover, trees dataset provided by the Madrid City Council could be drastically improved using satellite data, refining the municipality information utilizing deep learning for object detection. On this picture, you can see how the AI model manages to integrate the tree crowns that are missing in the original dataset. This might be the case of, for example, trees located in areas not accessible by city council officials. Finally, as my presentation comes to a close, displaying this project was also an attempt to demonstrate how innovative spatial data science methodologies might be applied on multiscalar urban planning practices, from the urban scale to the intermediate and streetscape level. Thank you again for inviting and for listening my presentation. If there are any questions, I am more than happy to address them.
Iacopo, what a fascinating presentation. Thank you so much for sharing that. I have to tell you, I'm from the US, but there are some areas like in the Midwestern United States or things like that where there are trees like palm trees and malls, and I wish they used this type of analysis to look at appropriate tree types that could go in places. Your presentation just had me thinking about a couple of things, but if it's all right with you, we do have a couple of questions in the Q&A. First, how can this analysis that you mentioned today about tree canopy be extended to other areas of urban planning?
Well, thank you for the very interesting question. Actually, these analyses can potentially be extended to all other locations, let's say many cities around the globe, as long as they have monitoring stations so that they are recording basically environmental data, and also an extensive data set, as we saw for Madrid municipality, about trees with all different properties in order to address some of the specific, let's say, environmental criteria that were shown during the presentation.
Absolutely. Next, we have you tried to use NDVI instead of AI detection for detecting trees?
Well, I've often used these kind of techniques. As at RHEA Group, we are working mostly, let's say, on satellite data, both low and high resolution satellite data. But in this case, the AI model was able, let's say, to detect specific trees in order to have a specific count to add on the Madrid municipality dataset.
Awesome. So the AI worked better with the satellite imagery that you were using.
Yeah, yes, indeed. Much more accurate, yeah.
Okay. And then how is this type of solution monetized? What other institution collaborates financially with things like this?
Well, this project was not monetized, let's say, by an institution directly, as it was, as I presented, it was a personal project that won the competition that was organized by the Bruno Kessler Foundation with EIT, Climate Solution in Spain. And let's say it is not monetized yet, but it could be obviously developed further.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And then one last question, and also thank you for your last answer. It sounds like there's a lot of realm of possibilities with an analysis like this.
Yeah, indeed.
Does optimal location criteria differ dramatically between different tree species?
Yeah, thank you so much also for this question. It's very interesting. So that's exactly the point. So the whole workflow and methodology allows, let's say, some degree of flexibility depending on where it is applied. So considering that usually every, let's say, nation slash region has the environmental agencies that are providing an inventory with trees and also with specific properties with trees. So obviously there are some species um, that are more sensitive, let's say, or absorb more particulate matter, and that's why we would be able with this methodology to consider, for example, just the particulate matter layer and see where we might need to locate specific species in an area that we can easily identify looking at data.
Awesome. Fascinating stuff, Iacopo. As mentioned, this talk has seemed to spur a lot of ideas in different ways you could go about kind of seeing where things can be located, what specific type, in this case, of course, tree species. And this talk has been recorded and will be uploaded to